Section 7 of the Fables of Pilpay. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Fables of Pilpay by Anonymous, translated by Abdullah Ibn al-Muqaffa and Joseph Harris. Fable 4. The Poor Man Who Became a Great King. It being the pleasure of heaven to rescue from misery a man who lived in extreme poverty, Providence gave him a son, who from his infancy showed signal signs that he would one day come to be a great man. This infant became an immediate blessing to the old man's house, for his wealth increased from day to day from the time that the child was born. So soon as this young one could speak, he talked of nothing but swords and bows and arrows. The father sent him to school and did all he could to infuse into him a good relish of learning, but he neglected his book and devoted his thoughts to nothing but running at the ring and other warlike exercises with the other children. When he came to the years of discretion, "Son," said the father to him, "thou art now past the age of childhood, and art in the greatest danger to fall into disorder and irregularity, if thou givest thyself over to thy passions. I therefore intend to prevent that accident by marrying thee betimes." "Dear father," replied the stripling, "for heaven's sake, refuse me not the mistress which my youthful years have already made choice of." "Who is that mistress?" presently replied the old man, with great earnestness and uneasiness, for he had already looked out for him the daughter of a neighboring hind, and agreed the matter with her father. "And what is her condition?" "This is she," the lad made answer, showing his father a very noble sword, "and by virtue of this I expect to become master of a throne." The father gave him many reasons to imagine he disapproved his intentions, and looked on them as little better than madness. Many a good lecture followed during the remainder of the day, to avoid which for the future, the young hero the next morning quitted his father's house, and travelled in search of opportunities to signalize his courage. Many years he warred under the command of different monarchs. At length, after he had everywhere signalled himself, not only by his conduct, but by his personal courage, a neighboring monarch, who, with his whole family, lay besieged in a small fortress, sent to him to beseech him to accept of the command of all his forces, to get them together, and endeavor to raise the siege, and relieve them, in which, if he succeeded, he would make him his adopted son, and the heir of his vast empire. Our young warrior engaged in this, raised a vast army, fought the besiegers in their trenches, entirely conquered them, and was the gainer of a glorious victory. But alas! the heat of the action made him not perceive that the fortress in which the king was in flames. Some treacherous person had fired it at the instigation of the general of the besiegers' army, and the king and his whole family perished in the flames. The old monarch just lived, however, to see his deliverer, and to settle on him the inheritance of his crown. The royal family being all extinct by this fatal calamity, the nobles ratified the grant, and our illustrious hero lived many years a great and glorious monarch. "I have recited this example," said the falcon to the raven, "that you may understand that I also find myself born to undertake great enterprises. I have a strange foreboding within me that I shall prove no less fortunate than this famous warrior, and for this reason can never quit my design." When the raven perceived him so fixed in his resolution, he consented to his putting it in execution, persuaded that so noble a courage would never be guilty of idle or unworthy actions. The falcon, having taken his leave of the raven, and bid farewell to all his pretended brethren, left the nest and flew away. Long he continued flying, and in love with liberty, and at length stopped upon a high mountain. Here, looking round about him, he spied a partridge in the fallow grounds that made all the neighboring hills resound with her note. Presently the falcon lanced himself upon her, and having got her in his pounce, began to tear and eat her. "This is no bad beginning," said he to himself, "though it were for nothing but to taste such delicate food. 'Tis better travelling than to lie sleeping in a nasty nest, and feed upon carrion, as my brothers do." Thus he spent 3 days in caressing himself with delicate morsels, but on the fourth, being on the top of another mountain, he saw a company of men that were hawking. These happened to be the king of the country with all his court, and while he was gazing upon them, he saw their falcon in pursuit of a heron. Upon that, pricked forward by a noble emulation, he flies with all his force, gets before the king's falcon, and overtakes the heron. The king, admiring this agility, commands his falconers to make use of all their cunning to catch this noble bird, which by good luck they did. And in a little time he so entirely won the affection of the king that he did him the honor to carry him usually upon his own hand. Had he always stayed in his nest, concluded the monarch, this good fortune had never befallen him. And you see by this fable that it is no unprofitable thing to travel. It rouses the genius of people and renders them capable of noble achievements. Dabshalim having ended his discourse, the vizier, after he had made his submissions and paid his duty according to custom, came forward, and addressing himself to the king, said, Sir, what your majesty has said is most true, but I cannot but think yet that it is not advisable that a great, a glorious, and happy king should quit his repose for the hardship and danger of travelling. Men of courage, answered the king, delight in labor, fatigue, and danger. If kings who have power strip not the thorns from the rose bushes, the poor can never gather their roses. Until princes have endured the inconveniences of campaigns, the people can never sleep in peace. Nobody can be safe in these dominions, while thou seekest nothing but my ease. He that travels meets with rest, and everything else that he desires, like the leopard, who by his pains and diligence, and despising the fatigues of travelling, acquired what he wished for. Upon this, the vizier humbly besought the king to relate that fable to his slave, which he did in these words. End of section 7.